I'm Vance Bastion, here with my co-host S.A. Bez Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 9, Episode 32 interview. We'll be talking with H.N. Hirsch and discussing his latest novel, the third book in the Bob and Marcus series titled Rain. Seen his previous interview, let's get to know our guest. Born in Chicago and educated at the University of Michigan and Princeton, Hirsch has taught at Harvard, the University of California, San Diego, Macalester College, and Oberlin, where he served as dean of the faculty and is now the Erwin N. Griswold Professor of Politics Emeritus. He's the author of The Enigma of Felix Frankfurter, A Theory of Liberty, and the memoir Office Hours, as well as numerous articles on law, politics, and constitutional questions. And recently, he dipped into fiction. Harry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you made it. So, for folks who didn't hear that first interview, let's give a real quick how you transitioned from writing politics and very serious stuff into writing very serious fiction.
Right. Well, I retired from teaching. I very much enjoyed teaching, but it was time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always thought that I might try my hand at fiction when I retired. And as it happened, my last semester of teaching was the spring of 2020, which is when COVID hit, and we all went on to lockdown. So all my plans went out the window. I was going to travel and whatever. And I had lots of time on my hands. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do it, this is the time. So I took out some old notes from 1984, decades ago, where some friends and I were sitting on a beach in Ogunquit, Maine, which is a little resort north of Boston. At the time, I was living in Boston, teaching at Harvard. And I was reading a mystery novel at the time that I didn't think was very good. And I slammed it down on the sand and I said, we could do better than that. And so my friends and I started to hatch this plot about a Harvard student who is murdered, and his young professor is asked by student's family to look into the murder. And I took notes on this conversation. And that was 1984. And I put the notes away and I went back to being a professor. And then in 2020, I took out the notes and I hadn't looked at them for I don't know how many years. And I thought, this is not bad as a mystery plot. So nice. I read a bunch of books on how to write mysteries, and I read a bunch of books on how to write fiction, which I had never done. And I started writing. And that became Shade, the first novel in the series that came out 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I found that I really enjoyed it, and I decided to turn it into a series. So the second novel, Fault Line, came out a year ago. And the third is Rain, which just came out. And my detectives are a gay couple who meet in Shade in the first novel. Marcus is at the time a young assistant professor at Harvard, as I was. So there's some of me and Marcus. And he meets Bob, who is at the time about to become a law student. And they become a couple. And in the second novel, the first one is set in the mid-'80s, 1980s. The second one, Fault Line, is set in the late 80s. Bob and Marcus have moved to California. Bob has finished law school and is an assistant district attorney in San Diego, where I lived.
Hmm.
And in Rain, Bob has become a defense attorney in private practice.
Okay.
And Marcus, his partner, is a professor at the University of California branch in San Diego, as I
Okay.
was. And one of his students is accused of murder.
Dun
And
dun dun.
yes, and he is accused of murdering his girlfriend. And so Marcus ropes Bob into defending this student whose name is Kenny. And that is the plot of Rain. The girlfriend, the deceased, was a young budding actress
Hmm.
and was beginning to get involved in Hollywood. And of course, Los Angeles is just a couple of hours up the freeway from San
Hmm.
Diego. And so that has given me a chance to talk about the theater world and acting and um, uh, bring in all sorts of unsavory Hollywood characters
From
into
Hollywood.
right. So in
So,
brief, that's the story.
so how many of those notes that you wrote on the beach back in, was it 84?
84.
Yeah, how many of those have you wrapped up? Like, did any of them make it all the way to Rain?
No, that they were notes for one novel, and
Okay.
that was the first one, Shade.
Shade. Okay.
But the character of Marcus from the notes has remained. And one of the great things about a series is that over which takes place over time is that
Hmm.
you can engage in character development and lives change and circumstances change and locations can change. And it gives the reader a chance, I hope, to get attached to the detective. And I had been a great reader of mystery series. And what I noticed and what I thought about when I started all this is that when you read a mystery, of course, you're interested in who did it and why. That's the structure of a mystery novel.
Hmm.
Um, but you keep reading because you become attached to the character of the detective or the detectives. I think that's true in the best mystery series. Tony Hillerman, his mysteries take place in New Mexico, and you get very attached to the character of the detective who is Native American. And uh, uh, going back, Dorothy Sayers, Lord Peter Wimsey, you get very attached to the character of Peter Wimsey. And so that's what I've tried to do.
I know also in a lot of, especially crime series, the location is its own character.
Yes.
Did you decide to sort of divorce from that? Because you've moved your guys around now.
Well, I've lived everywhere where I've set the mysteries. And in the first one, Shade, which is set at Harvard and in Maine, in this little resort, which I fictionalize a bit. That gave me a chance to comment on Harvard, the Ivy League, and say things I couldn't say when I was there.
Right.
And
Clever man.
then, San Diego, when I moved myself, when I moved from Harvard and Boston to San Diego and a state university, it was like moving from Earth to Mars. I had never
I've often
spent.
thought of my hometown as Mars.
I mean, I had never owned a car. That I had a license, but I had never owned a car.
Mhm.
I never spent much time in California. It really is a different country.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it very much becomes a part of the second and the third novels. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I have a friend who describes going from East Coast to West Coast as going from a picture to its negative.
In a lot of ways, it's really true, and doing that kind of move, it really allows insight into the nation's politics,
Hmm.
because in California, Washington is so far away. New York is so far away. And I would notice in my students, it was like, oh, that stuff, back east,
Hmm.
Yeah.
all that crazy stuff, in Washington or wherever. Um, it was interesting, and I tried to put some of that in the novels.
And it's also, I mean, for the history of California, being native born Californian, it's always fascinated me that people don't realize that California was kind of grown from the black sheep of many families in the East
Right.
who came out west during the gold rush. So you have a completely different dynamic of
Absolutely.
how the West became the West. And they don't, and a lot of people don't understand that cultural shift was intentional. These people were literally running away from those lives and
Absolutely.
Hmm.
reinventing themselves on the
And looking for
West.
opportunity that did
Right,
not exist on the
right,
East Coast.
Right.
right.
One of my recurring characters is named Cunningham, and it is one of those families
Hmm.
that came to the West in search of riches, found them. The Cunninghams, anybody who knows California will realize that it's very loosely modeled on the Chandler family, the
Mm.
real Chandler family, Dorothy Chandler,
Hmm. Hmm.
all of that. And there were these families, absolutely, who came from the East, and California and much of the West Coast was, compared to the East, just open territory,
Right, right.
Hmm.
Truly a
with
cowboy town.
truly cowboy, all the way through World War II and
Hmm.
the growth of the aerospace industry and all of that. And I've put some of that into the novels.
Now, where, just here, this is a San Diegan asking, where in San Diego, what neighborhoods are you in within San Diego?
Marcus teaches at the University of California, San Diego, which is up in La
In
Jolla,
La Jolla, right? Hmm.
where I taught. They live in Normal Heights,
Oh, okay. That's
and
exactly where I live for a good portion of my life.
I have a scene where they're buying a house and they're a gay couple, and they just love the idea of settling in a neighborhood called Normal Heights. It's just it's just it's just too much for a gay couple to resist. And in fact, it was named that because the state normal school was there for a
Right.
while,
Yeah.
and that's long gone. But the name stuck.
Yeah. I lived on Adams Avenue in Normal Heights, and my then boyfriend and we lived in a set of World War II bungalows that if you looked at it from the street, you would never know what was back there because
Right.
it had a gated front that was made out of wood. So it was like literally sealed doors. And when you opened it up and went in, it was this beautiful, lush garden with these little World War II bungalows. It was like a whole different world.
Yes,
And yet 2 doors down was a biker. I mean, it was the most bizarre surroundings to
yeah.
live, but it also felt really, really normal in a
and
weird
and and
way.
and interesting,
Hmm.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not at all a bland suburban neighborhood or
yeah.
anything like.
And the people that lived and populated that, we all came from. I mean, there were like 4 gay couples that lived there out of the 8 houses that were on that site, and the other 4 were straight couples, but we always commingled. We had dinner parties, we had big cookout. So it was kind of this little enclosed microcosm of San Diego that was in this little place. And it always seemed so magical to me because outside, and after I moved away from there, it was never the same. It was like that moment in time was such an encapsulated, wonderful little thing, and it's really interesting. Some people don't ever write about those kind. I mean, you get it like in Tales of the City, Anna Madrigal's,
Yes,
it's kind of this, it was very much that vibe
right.
living there. And it was so completely enclosed. It was like you were living in Wonderland or in Oz, and I think that a lot of people just don't realize these enclaves that exist in any city that have a lovely, wonderful, like feeling to them, and we used to go down in Kensington, which is right down the street on Adams Avenue, and
Right.
that is a really kind of upper class style homes of that era. So you had all these juxtapositions, and I just wanted to know where you set them, because I just think it's always fascinating when someone writes about San Diego to figure out where they want to place it, because it does say a lot about the stories.
Right, absolutely. And the other thing people in the East and Midwest often don't realize is California is very diverse. I mean, it's a huge state,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
I tell people on the East Coast, the distance from the northern border of California to the southern border of California is the same as the distance from Boston to Miami.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
And people on the East Coast are just dumbstruck when they hear that. And so San Diego is different from Los Angeles. The coast is different from the Central Valley. The Northern California is different from Southern
Yeah,
California.
it's almost two states. People don't realize that. You pass Santa Barbara, and Northern California is a completely different monster.
Right. And I do have some scenes where they go, for one reason or another, they go to San Francisco or.
Yeah, yep, yeah. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
Nice. Nice. So my other question then is about your time jumps. How has that allowed you to grow these guys? I mean, obviously their careers have changed a bit.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of the.
The
Oh,
time
my other
jumps.
the time jumps that you get to use between the novels.
Yes,
You obviously get to use that to grow the guys, but do you also get to use that to grow the world around them?
absolutely. And one of the reasons I wanted to carry them through over time is the chance to talk about national politics, the way
Mm,
things have changed, and the way gay life has changed. So the first one, Shade, is set in 1985, which was, of course, the height of the AIDS crisis.
Right.
right.
Rain, the most recent, is set in 1994, which is the Clinton era.
Hmm.
Um, I gave Bob, my attorney, a brother in Los Angeles who's involved in Democratic Party politics.
Okay.
And so that character gave me a chance to comment on developments in national politics, the way the parties were changing and so on over time. And the fourth novel, which I'm finishing, which is called Winter, and will be out in 2025. I moved them forward to 2004, when, of
Okay.
Oh,
course, things have changed again
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
quite a bit in national politics. Um, so absolutely, that was very much part of my motivation for carrying
Nice.
them through time.
I know this is a far-reaching question to ask, but do you have plans to bring them all the way to the modern political arena?
If I live long enough,
Please do.
if they live long enough, um,
Okay.
I would like to keep going. It really is interesting to have characters who get older and have issues. So in Winter, which is not out yet,
Hmm.
Bob and Marcus have been together a long time, and their relationship hits a few bumps, which happens.
Hmm.
Hmm.
They get through it. Um, I would like to keep going.
Perfect.
We'll see.
All right. Is there anything about Rain that we didn't think to ask, but you would like readers to know?
Um, well, as with all of them, my detectives, my main characters are a gay couple, but I've tried to write them in a way that would be appealing to anyone who's interested in mysteries, mystery novels, anybody interested in California. I did not set them out to just appeal to a gay audience.
Hmm.
Gay people are people, and there's lots of characters who are not gay, and Bob and Marcus have issues the way any couple does, and so I hope that they appeal to non-gay, non-LGBT audiences as well as gay readers.
Perfect.
Now I have a small
All
craft
right.
question. I have a small craft question. When you write, and what did you learn from the process of reading how to write mysteries kind of thing? Is it you have the murder and then you work your way backwards in crafting where the breadcrumbs lie? Or is it something that you write organically as you go through? You think, oh, I'm going to weave this in here, or,
Yeah,
how did you approach the craft of writing mystery novels, given
yeah,
based upon your research?
yeah. That's a really interesting question. I think when you start, you need to know who died
Yeah, well, yeah,
and who did it
right,
and why. And the why gives you the underlying theme of the novel.
okay,
So for example, in Shade, the first one, the underlying theme is greed. And in Fault Line, the second one, the underlying theme is political ambition. Um, and so you have a basic structure. And the
right,
great thing about writing mysteries is that the crime gives you a basic structure. And there are certain conventions about mysteries. You need clues.
right, right.
You need clues that aren't too obvious. You need suspects. Um, that kind of thing. But one thing I've discovered, which is really interesting about writing fiction, is that once you're dealing with characters that you find them saying things and doing things that you hadn't thought of before.
They truly
Because
take on a life of their own.
they take on a life of their own. And that's really interesting. And it's really different from scholarly writing, where you kind of need to know everything
Right,
before you
right.
sit down and write.
I always liken it to a meme I saw of a mother duck and her ducklings following around, and one of them is starting to veer off. Oh, they're all walking in a line. One of them started to veer off, and the caption says, "I just get my ducks in a row, and one of the little fuckers decides to run off."
Right,
And that's often how writing characters are. Your
right,
characters say, "No, I'm not. No, we're going to do this."
right, right, right. And you want surprises, but not unbelievable surprises.
Right, right, yeah,
And there are certain conventions. One of them is, for example, Chekhov's gun. Chekhov said famously, and it was about plays, but it also applies to mysteries. He said, if there's a gun in Act One, it has to go off by the end of Act Three.
right,
Right.
right, right.
So things that appear at the beginning of the novel, which may be completely innocent, have to have some significance as you go along. Um, uh, so there are conventions,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, but
I
once
was
I
just
had,
wondering how it was balanced against your research. If you found a way in using queer characters, if you found a way that gave it a different spin that you found really intriguing, which is why you've turned it into a series. So I was just kind of wanting to go down
yeah,
that road a little bit and just see how you crafted it and what appealed to you about it so much that it was definitely a series, not just a
yeah,
one.
yeah. In my former career as a professor, I taught a course on what I called the politics of sexual minority communities, LGBT politics.
Right.
So I was quite familiar with the history of communities over time. And the 80s are different than the 90s. The
Right.
90s
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
21st century, and so on and so forth. So I have incorporated that knowledge to the extent that it's relevant into the writing. And it's also, I have needed to do some research about the nuts and bolts of courtroom procedures.
Mm-hmm.
So in Rain, there are many more scenes that take place in the courtroom than in the earlier novels.
Gotcha.
And that did require some research about California law. On every state's criminal law is slightly different.
Hmm.
And I started watching a lot of mystery series on television, on streaming, SVU is very useful
Yeah.
because, they're very tight plots.
Yeah, because they've only got an hour to race through it, you know.
It's actually 45 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so actually it was very helpful in watching those, seeing what you can leave in, what you can take out, what kind of jumps you can make in time, that kind of thing.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I just wanted to go down that road a little bit because
Sure.
I'm always interested when mystery writers are on how they applied the craft and what way they built the story. Because I think for a lot of authors who are tempted to write mysteries, they don't really know how to craft it or where to go for it and stuff. So, maybe after we're done with the show, if you want to send Vance some links to some books about mystery writing that you read and you
Absolutely.
found really good, we can include them in the show notes so people can check those
Sure.
out if they're interested. Because we do have authors who listen to our podcast and watch it, and they might find that really fascinating to find those books and read about them.
Sure. There are some very good ones.
Okay, excellent.
But what I found when I read these books about writing fiction and writing even writing mysteries, um, the most essential advice that every instructor in writing gives is just do it.
Yeah, no,
Set,
absolutely, absolutely.
set your writing time, five or 6 days of the week. Get your butt in the chair and keep your fingers moving.
Yep, yep.
And if you do that, you may stare at the screen for an hour before you write anything. You may throw away pages and pages. Doesn't matter. Sooner or later, if you trust the process, if you trust your imagination,
Yep,
you
it'll
will
come.
come to a sentence or a paragraph or a plot point that works and that tells you exactly where to go. And you can't find those things before you write, before you do the writing. You have to do the writing as you go
Hmm.
along. And of course you revise and change things, but you have to trust the process of just sitting there and writing it.
Yes, exactly. Well, you ready for our get to know you questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, in the year of diving deeper, what's your favorite writing snack or drink?
Coffee.
Coffee. Okay. Iced or hot? Or does it vary?
Hot usually.
Okay. All right. What books did you read growing up?
I was quite a reader. I mean, if we go way back to childhood, I loved Babar the elephant and Winnie the Pooh and all of that. Babar the elephant was my favorite. Absolutely.
Of course,
Uh,
you with the lovely library you have behind you, I go to the
Yeah.
Gloria line from Anti-Venom. Books are awfully decorative.
right.
All right. Well, who's been the biggest supporter of your writing?
People I've shown drafts to, some friends here in Oberlin who were in literature department, the English department, or taught literature related courses, two in particular. And my good friend Priscilla Long, who is a writer and a freelance editor.
Mm.
And she has edited all of the novels. She lived in San Diego when I did, and we knew each other there. And then she moved to Seattle, where she's based now. And actually, she wrote a wonderful book called The Writer's Portable Mentor, which is a
Hmm.
great book for beginning writers. And she has been very helpful in and very supportive in reading drafts and encouraging me.
Excellent. All right. Well, are you a morning person or a night owl?
When I write, I'm a morning person. Absolutely. And what people say is that if you write in the morning, it works because your unconscious overnight
Carry
work on
forward.
will work on the book, even if you know
Right, right, right. Yeah.
you're not aware of it. Um, uh, when I'm not writing, I've found lately that my biorhythms are changing. I don't know
Oh,
why.
yeah.
It
Hmm.
may be an age kind of thing, but I seem to have more energy now in the evening than I ever did before.
Yeah, I get that. All right. Well, what's your favorite hobby outside of writing?
Sleeping.
Child. I could write a book on that alone. Power naps are a thing.
Students, I had this thing in the classroom where on the last day of classes, I would let my students ask me anything they wanted to ask me, personal or otherwise. And there were certain questions they always asked. They always asked, "Are you a good cook?" Which I'm not. And they always asked, "Who's your favorite writer?" And they always asked, "What's your favorite hobby?" And I would always say, "Sleep." And that's always been my answer.
Yeah, well,
Nice.
can't or that way when we're teenagers sleeping, we love to sleep in as teenagers, and I think some of us just never leave it. The value is so appropriate. You go, you know what?
Right.
All right. Well, has writing and publishing novels changed the way you see yourself?
That's an interesting question. Um, Writing fiction certainly uses different muscles, intellectual muscles, than
Mm-hmm.
writing scholarship. Um, so it's made me feel like um, I'm 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 I don't want to say bigger, but I'm different. I'm a different
Mm.
person than I was.
More aware, maybe.
More aware, more imagination than I ever thought I had. Um, which is nice. It's a
Yeah.
nice feeling.
All right. Well, if you were to write a spin-off about a side character, which would you pick?
And actually, I'm thinking of doing that, not in
Ah,
each one,
breaking
but
news.
I have a character in Fault Line, the novel that came out last year. There is a gay police detective named Jason, and in Rain, he is now a private investigator who
Hmm.
works for Bob. Um, and I bring him more forward in Rain, and I bring him much more forward in Winter, the one I'm working on now that'll be out next year. Um, and he's an interesting guy. He's an interesting character in a lot of ways. He was one of the first openly gay um, police detectives in San
In the
Diego
force, yeah. Huh?
in the first one, and um, I he a running joke is he looks like Tab Hunter. Um, so he's
Bit of a golden boy.
one of those
Hmm.
gorgeous California gay men, you know. Um, so I'm thinking at some point he may be the main character or a main character.
That's excellent.
Nice.
Yeah, and if you consider, with the success of Fellow Travelers, a lot of queers today, the children, as Billy Porter calls them, and
Right.
aptly so. I think it's interesting that you could always have like Bob could have queer uncle who was a gumshoe back in the 40s that nobody knew about. He was like Hawk, completely in the closet, but still active in his own way. So there's so many ways you
Yes,
can
absolutely.
go with side characters that could be a character in the family that you haven't met yet. You know what I mean? So you can always even go back further in time and have a
Yes,
parallel, kind of like Magpie Murders. There, you could have those kinds
right,
of two juxtaposed time periods that actually
right.
play to the same theme, kind of stuff. There's all kinds of ways, that you can go with it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I do have a character I have a couple of characters actually in Rain who are very closeted. And that's an interesting
Yeah.
dynamic
Yeah, actually, yeah. All right.
to deal
Well,
with.
have you ever traveled as research for a book?
Not for these novels. I have for scholarly books. I've done research at the Library of Congress in Washington and that kind of thing. But because I lived in California, um, I didn't feel the need to go back and re-examine the place.
Excellent. All right. And finally, how do you celebrate when you finish a book?
A really good pizza.
Oh, love that. There you go. There you go. Everybody
What,
suddenly is looking up pizza on
what
their
what can I
Uber app.
say? Doesn't take much to entertain me.
Right. Well, hey, yeah, it never hurts to have some good food right after.
Right.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, you made it through the list. Bravo.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So you've teased us with winter,
Yeah.
but you're still doing promotions for Rain. Do you have dates and times that you want people to know about for other appearances?
I wish I did, but I don't at this
That's fair.
point. But I do have a website that features all the novels, which I would like people to know about. It's hnhirsch.info. So that's HNHIRSCH.info. And if people are interested, they can sign up there for my mailing list and learn more about each of the novels.
Nice. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
Thank you for doing this. Thank you to your listeners. One thing I've discovered doing this is how different publishing is in the world in the digital world, and how incredibly important these kinds of things have become, which is great because anybody can look at a podcast.
Right.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
All right.
thank
I'd
you
like
very
to.
much.
Oh, no, thank you for joining us and for putting your story out in the world.
It's a pleasure.
All right. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.roadpodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye.
Hi, thanks. Take care.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.